Hello and welcome to our webcast for November the 4th, 2016. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, and now the chairman of the board of EPC, Euthanasia Provincial Coalition, which is the biggest opposition group
in the country.
Okay, for euthanasia and ending of life practices who discriminate people with disability and other people too. Okay, Toujours Vivant at Yes is a non-religious organization by and for people with disability and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminates against people with disabilities. Today's topics: 9 months of euthanasia in Quebec, the Commission reports. Second subject is assisted suicide bill approved by Washington, D.C. City Council, which is a bad news. So Amy will talk about it.
Okay, thanks. 9 months of euthanasia in Quebec, the Commission reports. Quebec's Commission on End-of-Life Care has issued a 9-month report on the province's euthanasia program that came into effect on December 10th, 2015. As of August 31st, 262 euthanasia have been reported by doctors in Quebec, and 263 terminal palliative sedations were reported by institutions as of June 30th of this year.
Plus or minus the same number of palliative sedation, which are most of the time euthanasia too.
Right, and that's for a smaller period of time.
Yeah, only 9 months. It's a kind of an intermediary reports.
Right, exactly. So the 263 figure was for 7 months up through June 30th. And then the 262 euthanasia was for the period up through 9 months up through August. And the first year anniversary will be the 10th of December of this year.
So it's even worse. Okay.
Right, exactly. So that basically means that more than 500 people were killed.
It's look awful to me program. Because it was not what it was promised to us.
Right. When they were pushing the law, they were saying it's an extreme measure for a few, very few cases. But, 500 people is not a very few cases.
If few is 500, I wish to look what it looked like a lot.
If I had a nickel for...
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The number of requests and completed euthanasia is 3 times higher than the original estimate given by Quebec's Health Minister Gaëtan Barrett, who believed that there would be about 100 euthanasia in the first year. At the current rate, there will be probably around 350 euthanasia by the end of the first year of the program, not counting the terminal palliative sedations.
Oh.
So we don't, right. So if after 7 months it came in at 263 terminal palliative sedations, that'll probably be around 450.
That number,
yeah.
And the thing is, it is accelerating. It's not a beginning. A beginning is only 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe a month.
Right.
But now it's more than that. So it's not the beginning. It's what it's looking like, and it's accelerate.
Right. All of the places where it's been legalized, the first year was a relatively small year, and after that, the numbers accelerated. So we can expect that more and more people will be having assisted suicide and euthanasia. We
are not different than any developed country in the world.
Right, exactly. The document, the report, consists of reports from institutions as well as the forms filled out by doctors each time they perform euthanasia. The institutional data, which was issued on June 9th, showed 167 euthanasia at that time, and that includes one that was done at the person's home. However, as of June 30th, only 161 doctors had filed their forms.
So it makes me some.
Right, they're missing some. And that's, 3 weeks after they're supposed to file them within 10 days, and it's 3 weeks later, and there's still 6 forms missing.
So it looks like what it happened before in Belgium.
Right, and that's after only 7 months of the program.
Yeah, okay, we're looking good.
Right.
Great.
This leads us to the question as to whether doctors are reporting every instance of euthanasia. Because, this way there's kind of a check to see, there's 2 sources of numbers of how many euthanasia there are. But, what if they decide the institutions didn't report the number of euthanasia between the 30th of June and the end of August. So we don't know how many more euthanasia there are other than the doctors' reports. So we have to hope that all the doctors that did a euthanasia filed their reports, but we don't know that they did. According to the report, 85 cases were examined in time for the June 30th report, while another 113 cases were handled before the end of August. That means that only 198 of the 262 euthanasia records have been examined. Of those, only 148 have been ruled on in terms of compliance with the law.
So they doesn't reach the point that they could examine everything, and at the same time, the one they have already examined are not ruled entirely yet.
Right. There's 262 in total, and only 148 have been ruled compliant or not. Okay, of the 21 cases which the commission found a failure to comply with the law, 18 concerned the lack of independence of the second physician. Health Minister Barrett stated in media interviews that he is considering making some adjustments to simplify the paperwork and ease the obligation of seeking a second opinion from an objective and independent doctor.
So the paperwork only.
Right. Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah, well, basically they're saying that because in certain regions it's hard to find an independent doctor, they're going to suspend the requirement that the doctor be independent.
Okay, I buy it, because if it's in north coast of Quebec or somewhere in Nunavut or something like that, it's kind of difficult to find a doctor different than yourself and your boss or something like that.
Right, but we don't even know that those were the ones that where the doctor wasn't independent. We can't know that because the information doesn't. We don't know which ones were out of compliance.
Okay, but
which cases were out of
even
compliance.
if it's the case, if he tried to do something, it will apply to all the province.
Exactly.
Okay.
If he suspends that requirement that the doctor be independent, it's not just going to apply to the small rural areas. It's going to apply to everybody. And so that will apply in the cities as well, where there is a possibility of having an independent doctor.
Okay.
Of the remaining 3 cases that were found out of compliance, the commission believed, based on the information received, that 2 of the people were not at the end of life, as defined in the law. So that means that the commission found that, they were supposed to be at the end of their lives, really, close to death, but the commission found that they weren't at the end of life, so they weren't eligible for assisted suicide.
And the last one was?
And the other instance, the commission felt that the person did not have a serious and incurable illness.
So as far as I understand, those 3 cases are murder.
Right.
Because if I'm not a specialist in law, I'm not a lawyer. She's a former lawyer. But I understand that it doesn't remove the sedation and the assisted suicide and help to die from the code. They just made an exception from the law, so it's an exception. Give to doctor the permission, the permit to kill in certain circumstance.
Right, and the person has to be eligible for that,
Yeah.
but these people were
So,
not eligible.
If are not eligible, defined in the criminal law.
Right, exactly.
So there is 3 murder,
Right, well,
at least technically.
that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, it could be a mistake. Okay, doctors are not obligatory murder, but at least it's a very bad mistake. When you kill somebody, even by mistake, the doctor should do something and receive some kind of sanction or formation, so it will not happen again. Something like that,
Right.
at least.
Right. They would need some kind of sanction or training so that they wouldn't do the same thing over again.
Yeah.
But we don't know what kind of enforcement they're going to have.
Oh, yeah, because there is nothing in the law.
Right, exactly.
Okay, they just forwarded it.
The 21 cases that did not conform to the law represent 14.2% of the total of 148.
14% is kind of high.
Yeah, exactly. While the three cases found with eligibility violations represent a 2% error rate.
Oh, 2% is even very, very high when you think about it's a matter of life or death.
Right, exactly.
Normally, it's 0. You should have 0. No mistake.
Right. And when we were talking about passing the law, we were saying that because that Canada doesn't have the death penalty because of the fear of wrongly.
The fear that it would be mistake.
Right, mistakenly kill somebody who is innocent. But in this case, we've mistakenly killed 3 people who were ineligible for assisted suicide.
And it's only in 9 months.
Right.
For the death penalty, it was over years. And now over months, we will kill people and nobody do nothing about it.
Right, right. There's no action pending about that. There's no suggestion that there be any action pending about it.
Even no inquiry.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
114 cases have not been ruled on. 64 were not examined even, and 50 others were not decided. So 50 were examined but haven't been decided yet.
Okay.
So, I think this is pretty serious.
I agree, because if about over 9 months they are not able to treat every demand or report, what will happen in a year or 2 or 5?
Right, exactly. They're going to be behind.
Oops.
The report says euthanasia wasn't administered for 87 requests. 36 of the people did not meet the eligibility criteria set out by the law.
So a kind of every number of people tried to be euthanized,
Euthanized,
even if they know most of the time that they are not eligible. They just try to push to get.
We can't say that they knew or didn't know that they were eligible, but at least some of the people who were not eligible were prevented from having euthanasia, and that's good.
Yeah.
But, there were some people who were ineligible who were euthanized. Also, 21 people died before being euthanized. 1 person asked for a delay, and 5 requests were still being processed. So there are a lot of people who requested it but didn't get euthanasia for one reason or another. Some people withdrew the request.
Yeah.
Some people weren't eligible. So there were a lot of reasons people didn't get euthanasia. The report includes no information about the underlying cause of the request, or the nature of the intolerable suffering, or any demographic information about people making the request or the doctors who are granting them. So we don't know anything about the people who are making the request. We don't know how old they are, what sex they are, what ethnicity they are. We don't know what their underlying condition is, and even the Ontario coroner's report issued it at least provided that information. And we don't know what the nature of the intolerable suffering is. And if you remember, in Oregon, the major reason people give for wanting assisted suicide is not that they have pain or are afraid of having pain.
The two together is around 22%, 25%.
25%, yeah.
Like that.
But the major reason people say is that they've lost their autonomy and they don't want to live in an institution.
And for real pain, it was, if my memory is good, is between 2 and 3%.
Right. That was at the beginning when they separated actual pain and fear of pain. For 1 or 2 years, they got a number of 2 or 3%, but they stopped doing that because it was so low.
Think about it. Is there any reason it could change a lot? It may change from 1%, but not for 10%. Or
Right. Right.
It's kind of impossible statistically. There's too many cases.
Right. So we don't know any information about why these people are asking for assisted suicide. We don't know if they're getting hospice care or not. We don't know what the reasons are. There are some individual cases that we hear about, such as the guy Archie Roland, who was living in a nursing home, and he wasn't getting good care, and that was the reason that he wanted to die, and he eventually did get euthanasia.
So this case particularly was put over the news.
Right.
But we don't ask for any information about people themselves.
Right.
That's not the case.
Well,
It's supposed
we
to
don't
be,
even know. We
Yeah,
don't even know what
it's-
information is asked for.
it must be kept private. But we need the information,
Right.
the general information, because if we don't have, how the government will be able to take decision about this law in the future?
Right.
There's no way.
Right. And we don't know about the doctors who are providing euthanasia. We don't know if it's, 5 doctors doing all the euthanasia, or if it's, many doctors who are doing 1 or 2
If
each.
we don't have the reason why people ask, the government will put the money in one place,
Right.
and it doesn't even know if it's the right place to put the money to
Right.
relieve suffering from people.
Right. Exactly.
That's weird.
Yep. The report does include the number of people from each region who requested, received, or did not receive euthanasia, but only through June 30th. So there's no information about the distribution of where people have assisted suicide after June 30th. It's only up through June 30th that we know the regions where people had euthanasia.
Okay.
This report raises many questions. First, is the commission equipped to examine and rule on the number of euthanasia cases it will face if it already has a backlog before the end of the first year? That's a legitimate question.
They have already some catch up to do, and I don't think they will be able to do that.
Right, and so the question is raised: Are they going to just not examine a bunch of cases? Are they just not going to rule on a certain percentage of cases? And what happens in those cases? Are we just going to assume that 3%, 2% of the cases are going to be errors and people who are ineligible who are being euthanized? Is that the way it should go?
Think about it. Even if they are able to rule over half of the case, statistically, the number will be plus or minus the same, 2%, 3% of error, and 85% without any trouble, and the 13%
Well, we
have
don't
to
know
be.
it's going to be stable that way. We don't
Well,
know
maybe
the
not
number of
stable,
errors
but it
is
will
gonna
not
go up.
change a lot. Okay, that's not the point that I try to establish.
Okay.
What it happen about that? It will not change a lot. So inside the part that it doesn't look, we already know that it will be at least 2% of error who should not exist at all.
Right, people
Okay.
who are ineligible who are being euthanized.
And we doesn't even know which one. So the doctor who will have done that things will not receive any note, will not correct anything, and they will continue to act like they do before.
Right.
That's not acceptable.
Right. There's going to be no change in that situation. And, you know, if all the cases aren't examined, there's going to be no way to learn to make changes in public policy, to do things differently, to reduce the number of people who want assisted suicide.
For me, it's clear as crystal, but it seems to be very complicated for government. I don't know how they think, but for me, it's very clear.
Okay. Second, how do we know that the doctors are actually reporting when they perform euthanasia? This is a chronic and serious problem in Belgium. Who's to say it won't become a problem here in Canada?
No, there's no reason.
Right.
We copy our law over the Belgium, and we are not different from Belgium. They are evolutive people. It is with inside a very good country with a very normal law for us, very close to us.
Right.
And we will say, oh no, Canadian, we are better than Belgium. Forget it.
Right.
We are not better than
Well, and we already have proof, because we already know that 167 euthanasia were reported as of the 9th of June, but as of the 30th of June, they only had 161 reports from the doctors, so there were still some doctor reports missing.
Yeah.
And how many is that going to be by the end of the year and by the middle of next year? We don't know. Third, if the government response to the 14% error is to remove the requirement that the second doctor be independent, how will it respond to the 2% of cases where serious errors of eligibility occurred? What penalties will these doctors face when they do not comply?
Nothing is put in the law yet.
Right. When they don't comply with the eligibility requirements of the law. And who will enforce the law? Those are important questions.
Nobody knows. The law does not define it.
Right, exactly. And, you know, they acted when they passed the law like nothing bad would ever happen. And here we see it isn't even a full year yet, and there have already been 3 cases of ineligible people being euthanized.
Something goes already very wrong.
Right, right. Fourth question. The information furnished in the report is not enough to enable the reader to know if those who received euthanasia were eligible and if all the safeguards were followed. We can't know that. Without detailed information, researchers will not be able to study the demographics and reasons people request euthanasia to understand the public policy impact of this law.
And it's needed. Just think about the government every so much year do a survey about the population. And it's very important, and there was a very big controversy a few years ago because Harper just cut the qui nous pose un questionnaire.
Oh, the census?
The census, okay. When Harper cut the census, it was, everybody say it was not good because we missed some information. And now we have a law without information, and we say it is good, it is good, it is good. No. We have to look at it and have precise numbers for knowing what happened. It may be very good. I don't know. But we have to look at it.
Right. And for example, if somebody asks for euthanasia and then they get palliative care services and then they withdraw that request, that shows us that palliative care services help people and are worth funding. But if there's
remove the funding.
Right. But if there's no information in the reports about that, how can we know whether palliative care was really working the way we hope it is and whether it should be funded? So, you know, and by the same token, how many people who live at home with personal care attendants that they hire are asking for assisted suicide versus how many people who live in institutions?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows, and this would be an important thing to know for making public policy about supporting people with disabilities.
Yeah, for making public policies, we need numbers and precise situation.
Right, exactly. Okay. So that's it for that. It was a very disappointing report in a lot of ways, and a scary report given
Oh,
the
yeah.
number of people who
It's scary.
died in that period of time. Okay, the next topic is the assisted suicide bill is approved by the District of Columbia City Council. In an 11-2 vote, the City Council of the District of Columbia voted on November 1st to approve a bill allowing assisted suicide.
Bad news.
Right, that's bad news. And this is a city council for a city with majority population of African Americans. And since 60% of African Americans oppose assisted suicide, you would think that there would have been a little stronger vote against it, but
yeah.
we
have to explain a little bit for people who doesn't know the situation of USA. The District of Columbia is not a state. Right. It's a kind of a town.
It's a city-state.
Yeah, and it have a special status over what they do. So the municipal council look like a government.
Right. It's
a full government.
Right, exactly. The city council is the full government of the District of Columbia and makes all its laws. Although sometimes the federal government can barge in and you know, have hearings and that kind of stuff.
At the end, it's the federal government who is responsible for everything happening inside the District of Columbia.
Right, exactly. The council must still hold a final vote on the bill, possibly as early as November 15th. The bill was opposed by disability rights activists, the Catholic Church, and many African Americans who make up nearly half the district's population and are the demographic least likely to support medical aid in dying. Advocates attribute this to historic distrust of the medical profession and fears of poor Blacks that lack of access to health care being steered to early death.
Yeah, even with the Obamacare, the governor, the Congress have cut it quite a lot. Right. So it still have a lot of people who doesn't have any healthcare protection, or even have a very bad healthcare protection.
Right.
And
they have the most basic healthcare protection.
And it's mostly poor people who have it.
Right. And if you can't find a doctor who will treat your heart condition, you're going to have a worse outcome. And that happens to a lot of African Americans. And there is even still a belief that African Americans don't feel as much pain as as white people.
That's not true. They are feeling pain as much as us.
Right, exactly. But some people still have that attitude. And just like some people have the attitude that disabled people, especially people with cognitive disabilities, don't feel pain as much as non-disabled
true at all.
Do.
Urban legend.
Right, exactly. So a lot of people are very concerned about this, and it's a little surprising that the vote wasn't closer. And I don't know enough about the makeup of the city council in Washington to know, but
one thing is sure, the council is mostly white, and
I'm not sure about
that. The chances are, maybe.
Yeah, chances are.
Okay, and the population is at least very highly Black.
Right, exactly. So, if you want more information about the subjects that we talk about here, you can follow us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujourvivant, not dead yet. You can go to our website at tvndy.ca. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christian for helping out today.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks to you for being there, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.